Hey, what is up? This is Jake with Exodus. On this week's episode of Whitetail Cribs, we're sharing an episode with Ryan and Jase Otto. They're going to be telling us some of their favorite stories and sharing some great deer that they've shot. Real quick before we get into this episode, if you want to be the first to know about the details for our 6-year anniversary sale here at Exodus, go to our website, exodusoutdoorgear.com. Scroll down to the bottom, type your email address in, and you'll be the very first to know about these savings. And let's go ahead and get right into the episode.
Hello, come on in. Welcome to our home. My name is Ryan Otto. These are my boys, Jase and Gage, and just appreciate you all being here. We ran out of room in our dining room and we kind of had to expand, but if you come in, I'll start to show you a few of them. All of my mounts, most of them have been shot in the last 15 years locally. This deer over here was killed out back on our 15 acres, which to me, to only own 15 acres and to harvest an animal is as beautiful as that. I was really, really excited about that. And that was right around the beginning where Indiana allowed rifles, and that was, I think, my first kill with a 30-06 in the state of Indiana, and had the 115-yard shot is I think what I ranged it at. Just a really exciting hunt. I think just any time I've hunted on my own property and been able to have a hunt like that's been just that next level stuff for us. So another nice 8-point that one of the farms that we've had privilege to hunt. I think we've hunted there, I'm gonna say 5 years now. We've had permission for that farm, and that the place has been just amazing to us. And I'll kind of go through the deer that we've killed off that property. It's a small property, but we figured out fairly early we were the only ones that are allowed to hunt it, and we decided to never go in it. We hunt the edges of that. That theory has worked for us. I think sometimes we just get lucky a lot, but hunting the edge and not disturbing the inner part of that property has worked really well. I always get these ideas that we want to change and get deeper in. I've tried it once and I ended up jumping a deer, and I went back to the way we were. Granted, we're not killing, these are obviously not 5-year-old bucks, but to me this is as good as it gets for me, and happy to kill a deer like this in a year. So this 8-point here was it was a neat hunt. I shot it with a lever action Marlin 44 mag. My boy was with me. He was pretty young at that time. He was probably about 12, and he had a 410. And I told him that the deer was way too far for that 410 to handle. And I'm still going with that. I hadn't killed a lot of good deer at that point in time in my life. And so I took the shot, and I only had a liver opportunity at this deer. I know what I had, and I felt extremely confident with that Marlin, and I took that shot and got him in the liver, and he expired shortly thereafter. But that was a fun hunt. One of those days where, as a hunter, you'd pay $1 million to have that hunt, because there was just one deer after another chasing. One hot doe just blew up that entire woods. This was the best buck that we had saw on that particular day, but the sheer volume of deer and the excitement makes the entire season. Deer like this are great, but hunts like that are what I think drag me out into the woods. That's what I always hope for, is that hunt that I'd pay $1 million for, to witness that activity. This buck here, this is one of them deer where you really have to dissect it to see how beautiful it is. It's extremely unique. He has the daggers in the back. I won a buck contest with this deer, and I ended up with a gift certificate at the local gun shop because it had the most points. I killed this buck in 2005. Got home from work fairly early, 2:30-ish, grabbed my 2 children. They were 6 and 8 at the time, 6, 9, something like that. And we went out and it's a funnel area, a natural funnel. We sat at this big oak, and I had Jase to my left and Gage to my right, and they're this high, And they grew up in the woods. My boys were in the woods at the time that, I would carry them and they'd be in the woods. And they each had their toy guns. And as soon as we sat, I'd seen deer movement out ahead of me. And this is one of them ones where, there ain't a second of that hunt that I can't replay in my head. And I would imagine that my boys have it ingrained in their brain as well. There was 11 does in that group, and then in this 13 point is what he had, 13 scoreable. And he singled out 2 does and came towards us. And, my boys are pretty funny. The story they'll share about it is, here they are, and I'm excited. This buck's at 40 yards, and I'm hunting with a Remington LT20 at that time, and that buck's quartering hard to me, and I don't want that shot, and we know we don't want that quartering hard shot. And the obscenities in which I think the boys said that I threw out there, or I'm hoping are things that they didn't repeat to their mom later in the day. But long story short, no one moved. They followed suit and did what I asked them to do, and it's another one of them things where, it seems like eternity, but to me, that greatest moment that we experience when we're in the woods is, come on, turn. And all them, I'm going to get winded. Something's going to happen. He's going to turn. I'm not going to get this shot. And he turned, and I was able to get the shot. And it was a double lung. That LT20 was a really, really good gun for me for years. And so grateful to have that one and share that with my boys. And a lot of these, there's a similar story. It's been my boys and I in a lot of these hunts together. So we'll continue around. I killed this buck in 2004. He scored 158 gross, netted 144. That's my biggest deer to date. I keep trying to match it or one up it, and I haven't done so. But I know that this was another one where my boys were young. We hunted together out back. We had a tree fort at that time, and we did the whole hot chocolate thing in books. And at that age, I knew I never wanted hunting to be a chore for them. I wanted it to be something that they enjoyed doing. So we got out there at first light, and their mom had packed them all the goodies and hot chocolate and books. And I know we saw 2 does out of that fort that morning. I remember that distinctly. And we hunted about 60 minutes to 90 minutes, and then came to the house. I jumped in my truck, drove down the roads, took 20 steps in the woods, and seen this buck running way out in the distance. And it's just one of them things that the timing was all there. It lined up. He chased this doe probably 40 yards, just turned broadside running, and was able to put a good bead on him, and double lunged him with that LT20 as well. And this was a one, so this was 2004. There was a lot of years where I spent duck hunting, and there was a few years where I got away from hunting altogether because just some poor choices in my life. But I distinctly recall after finding, walking up and seeing this deer, the moment that I sat there. And, this was truly just a great opportunity. This was, I looked at all these deer as a gift, and that was an opportunity, and this deer happened to come in front of me, and was really grateful, and still am. That's an absolutely beautiful buck. The next one here is, this one's really cool. This was the first deer I ever killed. I was a senior in high school doing a deer drive in northeastern Ohio. I had actually missed this buck on a drive before. I grew up rabbit hunting, so I didn't know how to aim. And it took me years to figure out how to aim and kill deer, and I missed so many deer in my life. I was hell on rabbits. And so that progressed, and I missed this deer earlier in the day, and then it was, I forget the date, I know it was 1989. But I walked up on this deer, and it was really windy, and I neck shot him. It was a Remington 870 special field 20 gauge, and that gun was a gift, so that was my first deer. The DNR scored that deer for me and aged it. They didn't score it, I was wrong. They aged it at 2.5 years old, and the deer scored just under 130 inches at a 2.5-year-old buck. So the genetics in that area were pretty good. This was my most recent buck. This came off of our favorite farm. This was an interesting one because I had that feeling that last 30 minutes that I knew I was going to kill a deer that night. And I don't know, as a hunter, I think we all get that feeling, and I knew something was going to happen. It's almost like that sense. I've hunted most of my life, and I knew something was going to happen. And this doe slowly come out of the brush, and I heard him before I saw him, low grunt, and he wasn't doing too good. I put the scope on his antlers. He had a significant limp. My first thought was 150-inch deer, he's down. And then I got a better look at his antlers, and I was like, well, he's not 150. And then I was like, but what a beautiful deer. And I noticed that limp, and I was like, I don't know if I want to shoot him. And then my gun fired. And that is the exact 100% how that happened. That my crosshairs found that mark, and the shot was perfect placement, and the deer didn't go 10 yards. But that memory lock of that crosshairs hit that perfect placement, and the gun fired. Probably one of the biggest body deer I ever killed. Just an absolute brute. The mount is just a fantastic mount by our taxidermist, Joe Birchler, to show how massive this deer's body was. And it really doesn't match the frame of the deer. I'm guessing he's right around that 130 mark, 125. I assume another 3-year-old. My first deer with a 350 Legend, which has been a transition for us here. So become super fond of that round. And we'll move on. Some of the other deer here, now we're getting into, these are deer that I can't claim these, although I will take some claim in them for other reasons. These two here belong to my son. The wall here is some other nice deer that I've been real fortunate to harvest on these properties as well.
All right, I'm Jase Otto, and I guess I'll start right here with some of my deer. This is actually the first deer I ever killed. Shot him 2010, I was 11 years old, using a 44 single shot. And it's a pretty cool story. My dad was actually with me. We were in a buddy stand together, and he came through panting, chasing. He wasn't chasing, but he was following trails of past does that came through, and shot him about 60 yards, double lunged him. He didn't run very far, and he actually broke this side off when he died. He fell in a creek, hit it on a rock or something, it broke off, but taxidermist was able to fix it, so it's pretty cool. Next deer is the one I actually shot this past season here in Indiana. Probably a nice 3-year-old, but he's got some cool characters, splits here, split on this side. I shot him actually in the exact same spot. Basically, my brother killed a buck the day before, a nice 130-inch deer. He just came through chasing a doe, and I couldn't tell at first. I just seen points and decent mass, and he stopped right behind a tree with his head was behind a tree, but I had a perfect shot at his body, so I waited, and I didn't want to take the shot and him not being a big enough deer, but then he finally ran through the brush, and I thought I lost him, and he came out in an opening about 100 yards, and I shot him with a 25-06, and he dropped. That was a pretty cool hunt. It was exciting. It was the first buck I killed in Indiana in 4 years. I've kind of been on a dry spell, so. But moving on, this buck here I shot in Northeast Ohio. Had a lot of character to him, and definitely a tough deer. He had a broken jaw, a couple broke off points, broke his main beam, broke a split on his brow tine, and had a puncture hole in the top of his head. Bunch of scarring, as you can see on his cape, but definitely a cool hunt. My dad was actually with me as well on that one. We were in an elevated blind, and he came through at about 100 yards and shot him with a 44 as well. But he didn't go very far, probably 40, 50 yards, and he piled up. So pretty cool hunt. This deer right here is a deer we call Jerry. We had a lot of pictures of him from June to about October, and then he kind of disappeared. The reason I named him Jerry is because the landowner was named Jerry. He really likes me. He doesn't let a lot of people hunt, but he always gets happy to see me, so I always think that's pretty cool to see an older guy let someone younger like me hunt and do whatever I want on his property, basically. So I shot him though about a mile away from where I had his summer pictures on a bean field, and I shot him in a 40-acre clear cut. Luckily, the landowners we were able to pick a few trees throughout the clear cut that they left for us to hang stands. So it's pretty thick in there because it had about a few years of a growing seasons, and but there were a few trails from the logging roads that you would have openings, and he was dogging a doe, and I shot him about 150 yards probably with the 30-06. And last but not least, I guess I'll go to this one. This is a deer we call 190. Didn't have any previous history with them, but definitely was just in the right place at the right time. It was September 27th, I think, of 2015. It was the last evening of the youth season here in Indiana. Me and my dad and my buddy Kane went out. We're actually trying to get my buddy Kane a deer, but it didn't work out, and we had seen some does that came behind us, and we ended up spooking them, and they took off, and we kind of got a little discouraged, in the last like 10-15 minutes. Don't usually do this, and I don't suggest ever doing this, but we decided to just get down because it was really warm out. We'd already spooked deer. We're like, oh, we'll just get down and slip out of here. We didn't think we were going to see anything else. As my buddy got down out of the ladder stand, my dad and I were in climbers. I started climbing down. My buddy was whispering to me because we weren't very far away, and he's like, there's deer out in the field, there's deer. And he's like, there's a big buck out there. And they're out at least 150 yards out in this hay field. I could see him, but I wasn't able to get a clear shot, and I was already climbing down. So I finished climbing down, hopped out real quick, grabbed my gun, and we crept to the edge of the hayfield, and I actually used my buddy to support myself, and I shot. We ended up pacing it. My dad paced it 167 yards, I think, so somewhere around there. But I shot, he dropped, I hit him a little far back and high, so I had to finish him off. But yeah, pretty crazy story, and I was surreal type of moment. I was just in shock at that point. I was thinking maybe this is a 160-inch deer, like this deer is huge, and my dad came up and he's like, that's a lot bigger than 160 inches. So yeah, he grossed 190 and netted 182 and 3/8. Yeah, just a giant. It was in the front page of the paper. It's pretty cool.
So thanks for coming to our home. It was really neat to be able to share what has been just a great 10 or 15 years of hunting with my boys and I, with you all. But time for you to go. We got dogs barking out back, and we have animals to feed. So thanks again for coming, and we'll see you